Hi, it's Katie Moran.
And MJ Coppola.
We're sharing an 11-part mindful mental health mini-series called RNTKY, sharing 11 reasons not to kill yourself. It started as a blog post, YouTube video, and now a Discord community where we host gratitude challenges. Episodes will be coming out between Thursdays and Tuesdays during the time of Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. Being with yourself in front of a sunrise can be one of the most serene and profound moments of your life. That's why this one is there are sunrises you haven't seen. And that's one of my favorite reasons because every time you see a sunrise, you're reminded that as the sun awakens to a new day, we can awaken to a new life. We are capable of what we can imagine, and this is our responsibility. We are meant to do the right thing. We are meant to believe in ourselves. We are meant to be strong enough to believe in others and inclusively support them. So watch a sunrise and know that you also have the ability to rise and make a new start. Leave the darkness in the dawn. Begin anew. Rise to meet the new you. Keep going. Keep your faith.
I love this one. There is, beyond the fact that sometimes it's hard, like to get to the sunrise because it's so early sometimes, but there is something so incredibly, uh, like healing. And I want to say that word, but there's like another vibe to it. It's like, um, I don't know. It's akin to like I've had kids before, and it's almost like kind of like a mini version of that moment where you just realize like how incredibly beautiful life can be. Like it's kind of this like that. And it feels like a gift. I suppose there's probably like I personally really like sunsets. Um, but those also have a different vibe too. But sunrises, like it's first thing in the morning. Most of the time, it's really quiet. It's like the hardest part of, I know if like some of us have a hard time with at night. So it is nice to have that moment in the morning where you're like, okay, I made it through another night. Like sometimes those can be rough. So
Yeah, I really connect with that. Sometimes I get if I'm having like a lot of nightmares or something, I'll get a lot of anxiety before bed and I'll even start to feel anxious when it gets dark. Um and one thing I love about the sunrise is kind of like you say, it's like really inspirational. And I think when you start your day kind of like so early in the morning that other people aren't awake, I think sometimes it helps you realize like the boundaries you might not have in your life. And I think for a lot of people who struggle with their mental health, usually they're very empathic, and people who are empathic can sometimes attract people who don't like kind of like hold on to them and don't expect them to have boundaries. And I think it's important to recognize that no relationship should be one-sided. You should never be giving and someone taking. And I love this. I talk about this sometimes, this idea that like an unhealthy relationship is give and take, and a healthy relationship is giving and receiving, and the person who receives gives back. And then it keeps going like that, and this idea that when someone takes, there's no giving back, it's just taking. And I think that's really important to recognize. And I know whenever I talk to people about their mental health, a lot of the times it's really hard for them to have boundaries in their life, and they put other people's needs before their own. And it's easy to see in the beginning, but then as you keep doing that and it becomes habitual, you actually don't recognize that. And I think waking up before other people wake up is one of those reasons that you start to actually open your eyes to see like how, like kind of like the silence, the isolation that you can feel within yourself in a place of beauty, not a place of sadness or darkness. And this idea that maybe we keep prioritizing other people before ourselves, and that we're not getting what we need out of our life because we are putting other people before ourselves. And it's really powerful to be selfless and to do selfless acts, but at the end of the day, if you're doing something selfless that impacts your mental health and mental well-being and your ability to stay on this planet, then it's not something that is a noble act anymore, because you're taking away from other people. And in that situation, it's an act of you taking, and it's not really a selfless act.
Yeah, and you said something about how you can be in that silence, like in beauty instead of like in the dark. And I think that's really it's an important point out, I think, because um like I know for myself that I mean, in as much practice as I've had, silence can sometimes be like really, really scary. Like a silence and saying no is really scary. It's the unknown. It's and what is that saying? Like the devil you know is
Mhm.
better than the devil you don't.
Yeah.
Like there's some serious, serious truth to that. Like as humans, that's how what category we tend to fall into. And so having a moment in the morning when it's quiet and there's the whole day like left, um, you can start new, and to have that silence in a place where it's beautiful enough to be able to be present and see that there's beauty in the world at a time where it's kind of scary, and maybe in your life at that moment there's not as much um not beauty that you can see outright, um not obvious beauty. I feel like a sunrise is obvious beauty.
Yeah, and I think you said this, we're all dragons and the fire in us needs to be sparked.
Yeah, I always so I had a mentor of mine that used to she did a meditation with me once, and she had me picture like for those of you who are not aware of like chakras or any of those things, so you have your solar plex, which is like right in the middle of like your chest, if you will, and that's some other cultures believe like that's where your self comes from, like the your self power. And so when we did that meditation, the fire would come up from there and just like rise up through, and you get the fire breath kind of thing. I always really liked replaying that meditation to myself, because when I see a sunrise, it always looks like, well, it's the sun is fire, right? But there's like a fire coming up, and it reminds me of like a dragon awaking, and then like it's its internal fire is like building as the day starts. And sometimes if I do end up waking up early enough to see the sunrise, I will picture myself as a dragon who's also fire is just like awakening, as and try to keep that image in my head as long as possible for the day, so that I have that like momentum and that motivation to do the things. And that's a really good time in my experience to, what is it called, eating the frog. I really hate that
Mhm.
expression, but while you have the motivation to do things that are hard, that's a really good time to do them, because you have that internal fire. And as your day progresses, like for lack of a better image, it feels like as you're learning how to be more authentic for yourself, sometimes it feels like people are throwing water on your fire sometimes. And throughout the day, you kind of lose it. And at the end of the day, like at least for me, I'm like, okay, solitary time, because I am kind of done. Like I need to go to bed and wake up and rekindle the fire. So
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the idea of starting the day and knowing that you have all day left to feel alive, and just kind of like that if you kind of start your day with something that is beautiful, it can just remind you that there is still beauty in the world. And I think for a lot of us, when we feel suicidal, sometimes we get stuck in the stuff that's not beautiful and kind of like negativity, whether it's inside ourselves or things that we've internalized from an external source. And this idea that sometimes we could feel like every joy we've had is in the past and that we can't go back there. And I just love this idea that you can see something that is just so beautiful and it can remind you almost that it reminds us we are alive and connected to this existence. And I think that's something you say, MJ.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, we're here. I think I can speak for myself that I play a lot, so much in my own head. And when we're in our heads, it's almost like we're not necessarily fully here in this particular plane of existence, on planet Earth, which is why I think grounding practice is really important. And when I say grounding practice, I mean like spending time outside, like seeing a sunset, really being like present in what you're doing, especially if it's outside. There is actually science that I started to see come out recently where it's like if you're actually like touching a tree or like your skin is touching earth stuff, like stuff that's from like living outside, like plants and all of animals and stuff like that, like there's a frequency and a vibration that actually raises in your body. And imagine that every morning or every time you see a sunset, like it kind of reminds you that when I saw this like woman being funny about, he's like, hey, you have this like vessel, this is your vessel, and when you're up here in your head, um you don't realize that your vessel is still here. And I kind of took that and I'm like, that's exactly it. Is that sometimes I'm so in here feeling the feels, that I forget that there's like this thing that I get to have this feeling, these feelings in. And it exists on this timeline and this plane of existence. And I know that kind of sounds like a little woo-woo-y when you say it that way, but like we're here. And sometimes that's very triggering. But also it's beautiful because we have choice, sometimes, to be able to choose like how we perceive things. And I think someone said once that the longer the span of time that you can look for um, look for little gifts in your life, the longer you have to look for evidence of beauty, the better off you are. So like you can sit down and say like, like I'm gonna say my age, sorry. So like I've had 40 something years to look back and go, okay, yes, there's been all this crap. But now I can look back and go, okay, well, within those things, like I had a kid and like that's larger scale things. But I've been to lovely gardens and I've been outside in my bare feet and I've been able to experience like the little tiny joys, like even if it's something like I had coffee this morning, like um I can take time to perceive my surroundings in a different light. um and I think that's also why sunrises are wonderful, because it's perceiving beauty the way it is in front of you. And not everybody's going to see it the same way either, but it's still beautiful either way.
Yeah, something that I think is really deep that I'd love to talk about is this idea as the sunrise as being a mirror to ourselves.
Yeah. So, um, as you know, I do a lot of mirror work. I'm a huge fan of that. And when I say mirror work, I mean like either standing in front of the mirror and really observing like this meat suit, um, and like starting to practice loving it. And also like mirror work, like how does the world around me mirror my current state? And sometimes my current state is sad, depressed, and everything around me feels dark and cloudy. And then sometimes the world is light and sunshine and beautiful, and my inner state is more light and sunshine and beautiful. And it can work the other way. So it can work in ways like I feel dark and cloudy, but it isn't, maybe it is sunny outside and I can go see a sunrise in the morning, so that even though I'm feeling that way, I can take that sunrise and say, I'm going to let it mirror me now. Like I'm going to mirror that sunrise as a beautiful, human being. It's a, we do subconsciously mirror, like without knowing we're doing it. And if we can harness that more consciously when we need it, I think it can be very powerful practice. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I think some of it might not even be conscious. I think some of it is just that it's like a symbol of kind of like just the vast difference and a symbol of change, and how the external sunrise, it goes from dark to light, and how that can symbolize a change within ourselves. And I think that's where, when I see a sunrise, the hope comes from, is this idea that maybe I feel in the dark right now, or maybe I feel like the shadow is the only side that is showing up. And I think this idea that within minutes or within 20 minutes that everything can so drastically change or be illuminated is something that is so powerful. And I think the symbol of it is so uplifting, even if we're not conscious of it. And I'm like, as a writer, symbols are one of like the most important tools for me in my writing. And I think kind of like the unspoken power sometimes is what really reminds us that, just like how could be such a drastic change in the external realm, that can happen internally for us, and that there's something greater than us, and that um we might feel so small, but we're a part of this larger thing that actually allows for us to have that change, and that even we might not be able to see a way out, but that doesn't mean there isn't a way out. And just like there's not really much sign of light before the sunrise, but that doesn't mean that it's not coming. And just kind of like the natural ebbs and flows of life, I think it's so important to recognize that light and dark and ups and downs are things that are temporary, and that it's very consistent that things change, and that we can't really expect that the way we feel now is the way we're always going to feel. And I think that's the symbol of the sunrise for me.
I think it's really fascinating that like the sunrise, the symbol of sunrise has been around for like as long as we even know. So like think about when you see your favorite movie, and like at the end of the movie, or some of the movies, like they've gone through this like huge ordeal, and then the sun comes out, and it's like the end of the movie when the sunrise, and it's like this like relief, like oh, like we made it, like we made it through whatever chainsaw thing happened in the movie. um that was a traumatic movie for me, by the way.
Mhm.
So I just think it's been around for so long, and I think the reason why is because it's so symbolic to this from dark to light. Like it's you're right that it changes so quickly, and there's so much hope in a sunrise. There's so much hope in knowing that like things change, and that the ability is there for things to just flow and change for the better, or just change in order for things to move in that direction. And you said something that reminded me of stuff. That's something that we talked about a couple times in the series, how and I don't know if I mentioned my dream in this, but I had this dream that I was a tree in a forest and there was just fog everywhere, just everywhere. And um and I remember, like, the farther up the tree I got, the less the fog was. So it was like, even though when I was the top of the tree, all I could see was just fog, but I saw the tops of the trees in the fog. So because I could see the tops of the trees, I knew that there was still a forest there. But if I went down to the middle of the tree, all I could see, I couldn't even see the next tree. So it's this, like, the path is there, the forest is there, the beauty is there, and sometimes we can't see it because it's foggy, but we know it's still there. And sometimes when you're in the fog for so long, you forget that there's things out that there is a sunrise. Maybe it's cloudy and you can't really see it that day, but it's still there. It's just something that's, like, inherent to the cycles of the day. I just think it's hopeful. But if you are in the fog and it's really hard to see the sunrise, like, sometimes taking a different perspective, like getting a higher perspective, can let you see that there are tops of trees, or like community. Also, I'll bring up community because I think this is really important, that sometimes when you're in community like RNTKY or something, you can see that the tops of the trees, there are other people in the fog, like like, oh my god, that guy over there also in the fog. So I think I just wanted to, like, mention that because I think we've mentioned it a couple times and it seemed relevant to this conversation.
Yeah, I love this idea that you said to me before, we perceive how we believe.
Mm,
And for me, that means, like, ideas and values are really skills to be cultivated, and
mm,
that even if we don't have hope as a value yet, like, we can cultivate it. And things like seeing the sunrise, I think for me, I think it's something that's subconscious that allows you to cultivate hope. And, like, again, you never see videos of, like, on social media, of, like, the darkness turning to the light. Like, you always see the light and how beautiful it is. And I think that's really a good indication of kind of like this myth on social media, that it's like the lightness that is the beauty, and not the fact that the darkness can turn into light. And to just kind of, like, make sure you're following people who remind you of the deeper truths to life, and not just people posting highlight reels. um
yeah. I have this quote, or this concept on my sticky notes, but I have my sticky notes on my phone. So I want to read it because I think this is really important, as we talked about perception. And so Sebastian, I don't know how to say his last name. I'm going to say Angus. Anyway, I butchered that. I'm sorry. But he talks about, so let's say you have a calculator and you put 5 plus 5 in the calculator and it comes up 11. Well, you and I know that it's 5 plus 5 is 10. And you could say, if you say, like, what's wrong with the calculator? Well, it's not the calculator's fault. It's actually the programming of the calculator that's the, like, the issue in this particular case. And that was really a great analogy for me, because we always, or at least me, I've always been thinking to myself the whole time, like, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me, when it's the programming, it's the way that I've been taught, or the way that I've perceived the world around me, and all the beliefs that I have, like, kind of, we get we get to be taught throughout our childhood and our lives. And it's not necessarily to say, like, the way that we are is not awful. It's just the programming that was just, it was so profound to me, and it really made me realize that like beliefs really have a huge part in the way we do perceive things. So I just wanted to share because I thought that was an interesting perspective.
Yeah, and also and going deeper on that programming, it's like what we put in to our minds, bodies, and souls. And this idea that it could either feed our spirit or it could, like you said, extinguish that fire. And just how powerful it is what we let in, and that we get to choose what we let in. And going back to this idea that a lot of people who struggle with their mental health have a hard time with boundaries just because of like the emotional state I know I have, and I know people I've reached out to who feel the same way as or has been in the same situations that I've been in, um, also say it's common for them too. And just this idea that putting you first isn't selfish, and putting you first is sometimes a selfless act because you can do it for the people around you so that you can be your best self, and that in your own healing, you help others heal and give them permission to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like always look for an alternative to put the mask on, you know, when you're in an airplane, put the air mask on your face first. When you think about like firefighters and EMTs and like all the people who come like save people's lives, they're always ready before they get there. So like they're always making sure that they take care of the tools that they need, their own health, hopefully. Like firefighters are always in their gear before they show up, you know, that kind of thing. So alternatively to the put the mask on your face first, I like that one because you can kind of see like clearly they are there to save lives, and um and they're prepared to do that when they get there. And I think to me, the preparedness that they show before they show up is akin to how we show up for ourselves and make sure we're okay before we show up to save someone's life or to, you know, do things for other people. Um, so
Yeah, and I love that idea that you can always expect that any soldier would be able to do a push up, and just kind of like how much it goes into how you can serve others with the preparation that you put into yourself and the work you do on yourself, if it's the inner work or the outer work, just how it all can allow you to, kind of going back to other episodes, like serve others in a meaningful way and build that fulfilling life that I think matters to all of us. And for me, it was really what changed my perspective on suicidal ideation. Um, because building a life that you want to stay in is something that is so powerful, and one of the best defenses against feeling like you're not meant to be here or a burden, because you are meant to be here, you are not a burden. And it's okay to ask for help because there are people who have been doing the push-ups, who have been training to help you.
absolutely. Yep. It's really, was it someone who said, and I don't remember who said this, but it's really important to have a scale of people in your life. So people who you admire and people who you like aspire to kind of be, and also people who you help, you know, like help more than maybe they help you, but a scale of those people in your life. And that way, um, you kind of not only are just helping people, you know, or just admiring people, because having be somewhere in between is really important because you can see that there are people who maybe are in a spot that you'd like to be in at some point. So you can aspire to go in that direction, but also like um, help others on your way, you know, to that thing. So, you know, kind of keeps you the middle way, moderation, which is always really hard to maintain, to be honest. But um, I think it's important.
So this is the last episode of the series. MJ, if you have one thought or message you want to leave everyone with, what would it be?
You're such a beautiful human. I am glad you're here. I am hoping that you will stay and keep going. Like, it may be foggy, but there could be a sunrise when the fog like dissipates. So keep going.
Yeah, for me, it would just be remember that you could always ask for help and that you can, when you're feeling good, write down the things that are your reasons for staying and reread it when you are feeling like you don't have those reasons anymore. Because when I first wrote this blog post of the 11 reasons why, I was in a good place. And maybe like a year and a half later, I was suicidal and I read it again and it convinced me to stay. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this list.
Yeah, I concur. Like the list, my own list has been saved my life, or at least saved me from a really bad downward spiral on several occasions. So highly recommend.
Thanks for sharing this holiday season with us.
Yes, thank you for being here.